And we'll be basing our exploration on the teaching of the 4 levels of awareness. So this is Bhante Sangharakshita's original Dharma contribution. You won't find this teaching in the Pali Canon taught by the Buddha. But still, I do think that this teaching is useful for us, simply for the reason that Bhante gives in the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. It's a text that some of you will have covered in the Mitra training course. And there he says that considering levels of awareness under these 4 main headings will give us a fairly comprehensive idea of the true nature of awareness. So, the 4 levels of awareness are awareness of things, awareness of self, awareness of people, and awareness of reality. So as I said, we'll be looking at this teaching this morning and the next 3 Saturdays. And when you look at that list, there seems to be a kind of progression in it, from the grosser to the more refined, perhaps. Well, certainly the awareness of reality is at the very refined level, but for the rest of it, I actually think that all of those areas are important, all are interesting in their own way and well worth being aware of. And this morning I will introduce you to the level of awareness of things. What things means in this context is our whole material environment. In fact, the whole realm of nature. And Bhante suggests that we are hardly ever really aware of our surroundings. And he says that the reason for this is that we don't stop and look. We don't stop and look. And his explanation for us not stopping and looking is that we are too busy. I'm not sure that that's really true, or the whole story anyway. And I'm well aware that some people are extremely busy with work and families. And so it's interesting that in this time of pandemic, some of us have lots more time, but others seem to be even busier than they ever were before. But even then, I think there would be time, just perhaps a few minutes, to stop and look if we really wanted to, and particularly if we were in the habit of looking, in the habit of stopping and looking. And I expect that many of us are simply not in the habit of looking at what is around us. So sometimes, we have a plan to go for a walk in the country or at the seaside, and we go with the intention of looking. We go with the intention of admiring the scenery and so on. But when we doing our ordinary things, when we go to town, travel to work, or just potter about in our own house, we're probably not aware of what is around us. We're probably not really present to what there is. I spend a lot of time outdoors, often on my own, and I like spending time in that way. I like stopping and looking. And I assume I got this habit as a child when I spent most of my time outdoors, summer and winter. And I was really lucky not to start school until I was 7. So I think at least 4 of my first 7 years, I had this glorious freedom to roam outdoors, mainly in the forest that surrounded both our winter home in town and our summer house in the country. So in the evenings, it was my big brother's job to come and first of all to find me, then catch me, and then drag me home. And I think that freedom to roam gave me the habit of looking, stopping and looking, being really interested and curious about things of nature, whether those things are sentient or non-sentient. Now, Bhante goes on to say that not only do we not really look, but even if we were to look, we don't see things in themselves. We see our own projections. We see through what he says, the veil or even the fog of our mental conditioning. So I think our job then is to become aware of this first level, the level of things, by starting to look, by starting to really pay attention to the things that we do see. Now I have some random ideas about how we might start to train in awareness of things. So I suggest that we train ourselves gradually to start looking, to start paying attention, to start noticing the details. And the obvious place to start is to start looking at things that we find beautiful. So I've asked Sthiranaga to show us some of my photos. Now they are my photos, so the quality is not great. But anyway, they are images of various things. And so first of all, I'm going to show you some things that I find beautiful. Now, you might not find them beautiful, but anyway, you get the point that we can start with what we already find beautiful. So can we see the first 4 photographs? So having made a start with things that we find beautiful, we could next look at objects that we find both beautiful and devotional. I suspect that most of us, you can see in the background in my room, some rupas. I can see many tankers behind some of you. And I suspect that most of us have a number of devotional objects in our home. And I sometimes wonder Well, you might ask yourself this question: do you actually still see those things? Are you still aware of those things? And are they still something that arouse feelings of devotion in you? Because things change. So, you can be quite discerning as you like. We won't all be stirred up by the same devotional objects either. So let's have a look at the next 4 items. So I'm not saying that just looking at a few photos is going to complete our training in learning to look. They're just a few suggestions as to how we might move from the obvious to perhaps the less obvious things to look at. So we could next proceed to things that are interesting in some way, perhaps some odd things that we might notice, some things we become fascinated by, some details that catch our attention. They might even be things we're not quite sure what they are. And that's, part of the fascination. Let's not label, let's just look. What are we really seeing? So can we see the next 4 images? And we could also become intrigued by what we may first of all think of as ugly, what we'd perhaps rather not see, or things that are old, things that are broken, things that are falling apart. So we'll have a look at these pictures now. I think for us as Buddhists, the last category is especially worth paying attention to. I think the objects that we saw were WabiSabi. Yeah, this is the Japanese idea of perfect imperfection, finding beauty in everything that is imperfect, everything that is impermanent, everything that is incomplete. So Wabi is the expression of both simplicity and impermanence, flaws and imperfections. And Sabi expresses the effect that time has on the substance of any object. And together, WabiSabi embraces the idea of aesthetic appreciation of aging, of flaws, and the beauty of the effects of time. So the two separate parts, when we put them together, complete each other. So WabiSabi means simplicity and truth. It's an expression of any object in its naked reality. For a Buddhist, WabiSabi is a life detached from the material obsessions of the world. So when we look at things with the WabiSabi mind, we have the teaching of impermanence in itself. So finally, I suggest that we look beyond the material, beyond the obvious, beyond what is physical, visible with the physical eye. Now, I was hesitating whether to bring this category in. Because obviously I can't show you any photographs of invisible things. But I think that the completion of our awareness of things lies in our ability to see beyond the material world. With it's not easy to say with what we are seeing. We're seeing perhaps with the inner eye, perhaps with the spiritual eye, perhaps with the eye of myth and legend, or the eye of imagination. Yet, I'm not saying that what we see with that eye is merely imagined. I suggest that those things we see with that non-material eye, if you like, are as real as the things that we see around us. My friend Vararuchi, who's a physicist, tells me that instead of the 3 dimensions that we all experience, in the universe there are at least 13 dimensions. So I assume that although we are unlikely to experience all of those dimensions, 1 or 2 of them might be accessible to us. Some of us may have had experiences that we can't quite explain. So I was particularly thinking on my recent solitary retreat, I had a very strong sense of beings, other beings around me, invisible beings, perhaps beings from some other dimension. I don't want to make too much of it because it'll start to sound unhinged if you're not familiar with those sort of happenings. All I'm just saying is that perhaps we can open the eye of our minds to other possibilities beyond the material and beyond the familiar. So in the just coming to an end now. In the art of reflection, which again some of you are familiar with from the Dhamma training course, Ratnaguna quotes from a text by Kafka. And in that quote, Kafka is suggesting that we spend time sitting and listening, just simply waiting, being still and alone. And he says, the world will freely offer itself to you to be unmasked. It has no choice. It will roll in ecstasy at your feet. So I think I can make the claim that if we seriously train in awareness of things, the world will indeed roll in ecstasy at our feet. Thank you for listening.